Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics and TIE Software. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we are back with another episode of Freight Friends with our favorite Grace Sharkey. So, Grace, how you doing? Travel's over
Yeah, it
for
is
now.
for a couple of weeks, and then we head down to Kentucky for Matt's, which I'm really excited for. I mean, that's a whole different experience in and of itself. So, definitely different outfits worn at that one compared to the rest. You could say a little, much more casual. Uh, Maybe I'll wear a heel. Maybe I'll get crazy with it. We'll see. No, I can't. It's if anyone's been to Matt's, it's almost like it almost feels like a fair, like a fairground type of like atmosphere. It's like very, very casual. Like it's like one of those you better have jeans on type of situation. So
And
I'm excited for that, if anything.
how many people go to MATS? And for folks who don't know, what does MATS stand for?
The Mid American Truck Show. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, and I said Louisville
You
correctly.
did. Good
Yeah,
job.
yay! Um, and it's how many people go to it? Thousands, I would say. Well, let's see. If they said manifest is 5,000, that means much closer to like 7 to 10,
Oh,
maybe.
wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's two big rooms that have like trucking companies and all that stuff, and then there's another third room that's full of like just different vendors, and I mean, even like companies like that sell just like kind of truck swag, and I mean, everything will be there from like people that sell different chrome extensions to just lights to speaker equipment to
And when you say
insurance.
chrome, you mean like Chrome on a truck, not like Chrome the browser.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, like
Okay,
a
okay.
different like
I was
things
like,
that you
"Oh,
can.
wow, that's interesting."
Yeah, Google's there, front and center. No, yeah, no, it's like just. And when I say fairground, like it feels like if you've ever been to a fair, like you have like all of these like stables full of like animals and stuff like that. Like it's kind of like comparing truck drivers to animals now, but it is like that. I mean, there's kids. They're like people bring their kids because all of the trucks are there for the
That's cool.
truck beauty competition and everything. So, yeah, it's a lot more. It's really fun, and I'm excited. I think we're gonna be doing some stuff with. It sounds like Charles Gracie over at Hot Seat Services and Truck Parking Club and Lost Freight with Reed too. So gonna have like some fun dinners. Excited to see Adam Wingfield. He put on a really cool like kind of like teaching lesson while we were there. So that was fun. I don't think I'll be ghost hunting this year. I don't think I have time for that this time around, but because there's a really cool insane asylum down the street that I
My
spent
dad
the
has told me about that because I
really.
my dad's side of the family all sort of we have this family history book that, 5 brothers from immigrated over from Germany over to Louisville, Kentucky, and
Yeah,
that's,
the
that side of my
tuberculosis. Yeah,
and, but my dad has been there, and he said that there's, like, this chute, like a laundry chute
yeah,
that
with
he was
the dead
crawling
bodies.
up, and he crawled up in it. They didn't do, like, official tours back then, so it was just like a neighborhood, kids kind of thing. But
Yeah.
he's been in it, and he didn't see any ghosts, but he said it was absolutely creepy. And the moment that he realized that he was in over his head was when he was climbing up that chute.
Yeah. It's it's funny they tell you like if you go down the chute, like it's much more of a walk up than you think it is. And I remember like, dude, because the chute like has like a regular like ramp going down, but then like yeah, you're on your way back. You're like, I think it's like close to like a half mile, if not a full mile down. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's fun. So yeah, I won't be doing that this year, but I actually an article by the time this comes out, the article will be out too. Oop, just knocking over everything today. Um, I actually Uber Freight is doing a really cool initiative with a photo book project called Sisters of the Road, and it would say a woman from well, she actually grew up in the United States, but she lives in Britain now, and she basically met with a number of female truck drivers, took some really awesome photos of them,
Oh,
and told their stories through a photo book. And now, starting tomorrow, and this is March 1st, for whenever this airs, March 1st, they're starting in San Francisco, and an Australian woman who's a truck driver in the United States will be hauling a 53-foot trailer. That inside the trailer is the full like exhibit of all the
Oh,
photos.
cool.
So they're going to start there March 1st in San Francisco, and they'll be ending the tour on the 22nd or 23rd at Matt's. So if you guys do go to Matt's, go check this out. Sam Hollick over at Uber Freight's marketing team, she's just so good at what she does. I always tell her, like, you come up with the smartest stuff for these things. She used to work at Convoy as well. But yeah, so you'll be able to check that out at Matt's too. And Uber Freight for anyone. Perfect. There it is. Yeah, they're perfect. There we go. So
Great
for
photo.
anyone, yeah, anyone who wants to join them as a convoy, because they already have like a couple people who will be following this truck for the next month too. Uber Freight's and their Power Loop will hook you up with a trailer and help you find loads so that you can make the most out of it as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
good freight marketing right here. You're
right.
kicking the show off right. This was very unexpected. So yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, maybe sign up Sam for one of your episodes because she is very, very good at what she does and coming up with these things and finding these really cool stories. And it's funny too because actually the Australian woman is that girl right there in the photo, that woman in the photo there. And when I was interviewing, she said that in order for her to get to San Francisco from North Carolina, Uber even found her alone. Like, so she didn't even have to like drive. I'm like, there we go, Uber, like finding capacity when you need it most, you know?
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so she actually was able to make some money while doing this. So yeah, it's gonna be really cool. And again, you'll see an article too on some interviews I did with them for the first day of Women's History Month. So
Awesome. Heck
yeah,
yeah. Well, that's a good segue into going into speaking of, I guess, honoring carriers and talking about what their impact is.
yeah,
Let's talk about this story that you just had. And I guess maybe I should give a roadmap because we kind of just jumped into it of the show
yeah,
today.
for
But we're
sure.
gonna, yeah, we're
As
gonna talk
always.
about this. We're gonna talk about a few other different topics. To include Baxter Bailey, which is a company that is very new to me, but apparently not new to the industry. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit later on. Then I'm gonna talk this new cool business, not or newish business, new concept. I guess this is going to be a show about new to me. Another manufacturing company that has been around since 2020, Hadrian is, I believe, how you pronounce it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them. Then we're going to get into the makeup supply chain, which is something that we sort of talked about a couple episodes back because for
Yeah,
folks who may be new here, Grace and I do this show once a month together. And then if we're at a conference, we will typically record together on site too. So if you've seen our recent video from Manifest, there was a show that we recorded live at Manifest. Shout out to Zell Logistics for hosting us. That was we were able to get that content and post it up. And I believe, depending on when you're listening to this, it was posted earlier this week. So the 27th of February, you can find that on YouTube and different podcast players. But we do the show once a month and we talk about basically whatever we want that's going on in freight.
yeah.
But we also really like to highlight and not just for Women's History Month, we like to highlight it throughout the year of women doing cool things in freight, just freight marketing in general, some of the bigger topic stories, and then also we each pick a source to porch segment. And for this week's show, we're actually going to cover the greater topic of the makeup supply chain and some fun facts that you may not know. So now that you have the roadmap for the show, let's get back to the article in hand, and that is Isometric Technologies, which we've talked about them a bunch before, which is pretty much like a credit score for freight brokers.
Yeah,
Shippers and
good one.
carriers can also use it as well in order to find those great broker relationships. But they honored the 50 transportation providers with service awards. So set this one up for us. Why is this a big deal?
So this is cool because it kind of showcases to you like the long-term effects. It's funny, Thomas brought this up to me, clearly this isn't going to include every single carrier in the industry because you have to be connected, or at least like the companies you work for need to be somehow connected to ISO in order to qualify for this. So clearly, if you haven't run a load for a shipper or someone who uses ISO's technology, then you probably won't show up for this. But it is interesting to see this kind of like third-party review of what carriers and logistics providers are truly doing for their customers. And it's all data related, right? It's
Mm.
not how you feel. It's not just a nomination based off of, a quick thought. It's actual, like, here is the statistics behind the work that you do. It's an actual grade. And I thought it was pretty interesting, especially like looking into some of like retailer statistics. If you click on, I think I put a link into their blog there too. They dive into a lot of this directly as well. For instance, like getting into on time deliveries for instance, Walmart hit 87.7%, which, kind of, it's interesting to see that, especially from the point of view that like Walmart just recently dropped their on time and full performance levels down to 90. So they're getting closer to like what actually is happening. And if you as a servicer of Walmart are saying you're trying your hardest and you're only at 65-70%, well, now maybe there's some ways that we can improve if everyone on average is getting close to 87%.
Mm.
So I think that's cool. It's like a way for you to actually judge your business and your solutions and your actual quality of service based on your peers in a way, right? So of course it's interesting as well going into some of the winners, like especially for best carriers for retail. I mean, statistically wise, GAT of Fort Wayne was number one for Walmart, and I think sometimes you sit back and think, can I be a carrier and not be like Schneider or some of these big guys and still compete? Yeah, you can.
Hmm.
Kroger was Buchanan Hauling and Rigging, which I've used before. Great company. I love this one. C.H. Robinson had the best service awards for Amazon, which is just like funny to
Interesting.
me. Like one of the biggest one of the biggest public logistics companies is being serviced by another large public logistics company, right? Very well. So shows you how fragmented this market really is and how much we need all the players in it. So I just think it's kind of cool to even see like for instance, it was brought up Uber Freight, right? Had the best service for the Southeast region. So it
Hmm.
kind of like shows you, like when we all pick up the phone and we call people and we say, yeah, like what lanes are available today? Like at some point, it's gonna turn into a conversation of like this, like what region are you best in?
Hmm.
And can you answer that question as an organization? One of our good friends, Brittany Trailer, right, of Trailer Transpo. If I really love the work that she does, because if you go to her website or if you are even like listen to some of her sales pitches and content that she makes, like she's never like we go everywhere. She's always constantly like we are very good at the Southeast.
Hmm.
And if they start to gain traction in another lane, she'll bring that up. And I think that's where we're going to start to see some of these calls going to. And for shippers out there might be watching and listening, like have that type of discussion with people. If someone calls you and says, hey, what are you working on? And you just, and they just say, well, like we've got carriers everywhere. Like, put that to a halt. Like start sticking up for yourself in the freight that you have and say, listen, like what lanes are you good at? Because we both know that you're not good at going everywhere. So I think it's just going to set a bit more of a standard, a bit more transparency, right, in terms of what our peers are doing. And I also love the honorable mention of Convoy at some point in
I
this.
did notice that.
Yeah. Because they would have, like I said, they would have been an ISO winner. So RIP, I guess. So
Yeah.
I don't know
Does
if
that
they'll ever.
award now transfer over to Flexport too?
Right? Yeah, you did it again, Peterson. You didn't even know that you did it, but you did it. So I guess so.
I have a dumb question.
Yeah.
What's RDD appointments?
I think that's let me double check because I had it in in some of my notes that I can't remember now. Uh
So sorry, I know I put you on the spot there.
no, 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 no. I
Trying
want
to
to
see if
say
they actually explained it in the post. Because I think that these numbers are pretty interesting because it says who is responsible for 23% of missed RDD appointments. So I
I
guess.
want to required delivery date. That's what it
Oh,
is.
okay, okay.
Yes. So it's like you got there on time the day you're supposed to. You didn't say, hey, like, ooh, something happened. We'll be here tomorrow. Because a lot of time, like if you work with Walmart and stuff like that, right? They'll say, get it here as long as it's no later than this date. So that's likely like they might have delivered a day early or something along those lines too.
And so it's pretty interesting to say, before the ISO workflow, here's the responsible party. So 64% of folks were blaming the carrier. But then after ISO gets involved or after you start working with ISO, only 44% of late deliveries were the carrier's fault. And so I think that that's super interesting because the retailers both jumped. Retailers and shippers jumped after that, and so I wonder if customer is the same as retailer. That you can compare those to the same here. So that's
Mm.
interesting to see that before maybe the shippers and the customers were blaming the carrier, whereas if you dig a little bit deeper into the data and some of the benchmarking items that you were laying out, that it increases the blame and the failure on the retailers and the shippers. And so from that lens, maybe it's almost like putting up a mirror to some of these shippers of you're the reason why you're experiencing some of these problems that you're going through, instead of always just blaming the carrier.
I truly think that like when I brought up Walmart earlier, and I think that's why they've brought their service level requirements down as well. Because I think for them, learning about why some of these hiccups occur and how all of this gets to why that bad behavior is happening
Mm,
is something they care more about than just having a perfect supply chain, right? Like for instance, let's say they're working with a popsicle manufacturer, and whenever that popsicle manufacturer's logistics company goes to make an appointment for Walmart, there's nothing within 24 hours. So it makes it very difficult, right, to find a truck who's going to be there perfectly without anything spoiled or sitting over the weekend or putting the shipment at risk. So like knowing like, listen, we need more lead time in order
mm.
to move some of the fresh produce. And I think that's what they're looking for more is like, okay, we as long as you're near the 90, we don't care what happened. We want to know what's happening in that 10% that's not getting us there, right? So I
Yeah,
think they're being more open than they ever were before.
I think that that's super interesting. So that's a great breakdown, and we've talked about ISO before, in the past on this show, about it being, sort of why. I wonder why it took so long for people to start getting these benchmarking insights from brokerages, because it's been such a battle over the last year or so. When you refer to like broker transparency and things, that is something that carriers are really pushing for. I'm
I
just a
think
little shocked that it took this long for something like this to come to market, but, thankful it's here regardless.
I think a little bit has to do with how you're making money off of it.
Mm.
I'm just gonna kind of whisper that out there. Uh, um, I think that question comes up a little bit, right? Because you want to make sure you stay avoiding pay for play type of situations.
Mm,
But I think the way that I've seen like the platform, and I've kind of sat in like a selling situation, if that's what you want to call it. And it's valuable. It's worth I think what they're selling it for. It's just kind of we're not going to get into it, but again, it's are you training your teams to use this data on phone calls in conversations to actually be worth the ROI
mm.
at the end of the day. So, and it's not that bad to be honest with you.
All right, let's get into one more quick topic that I wanted to make sure that we hit on is we are recording this on leap day, so February 29th, the extra I guess day.
Extra Black History Month Day, way
Yes,
to go!
that too.
Woo, woo.
Well, that is the main point of sort of what I'm bringing up next is you've been doing this great series all throughout February, really highlighting Black Americans, or is it American specific? I would imagine it probably is.
Yeah, yeah, but it is America, and it's our holiday, so I did try to keep it Black American history in that regards, and so yeah, but it's mostly the tough part about it is it's more global, right, because of where everyone came from, but still, yeah, focused on American history through the Black perspective.
And then with these posts, what you're doing is really highlighting the contributions from Black Americans into freight and transportation. And so a lot of this stuff, I mean, I would imagine a lot of people did not know until you started making these posts. So I'm curious if you have a couple favorites that stand out.
I do. And one of my favorites is actually, I just want to pull it up so I make sure I'm talking about this one correctly as well. Perfect. Uh, I actually learned about this from a TV show, to be
Mm,
honest with you. So, it's it's basically called the was originally called the Negro Motorist Green Book. It's called the
mm,
Green Book in particular over time. I learned about it through an HBO series that actually stems from a book series, which I won't get too much into because long story short, the author doesn't have the best history, but
mm.
it's an old book, Lovecraft Country, and they made it into a really interesting, like if you like sci-fi history, like kind of like if you like Atlanta or like kind of these stories and shows that mix sci-fi with like real life,
Mm.
go watch it. It's incredible. It's one of my favorite shows I've ever seen. They highlight at one point, pretty much every episode has something to do with Black history, and but in like this weird sci-fi way as well. So it gets really interesting. But outside of that, there's an episode on the show called Sundown, and it's about there's an overarching theme of all of the episodes where they're trying to kind of travel across the country and learn about someone's history at the time. But in order to do so, they have to go with, I want to say it's like the uncle, whose main job in time, and this was a real job back in the day, and he was a Black man himself. His job was he was like a travel agent. He would help
Mm.
Black families travel across the United States. And so it actually stems from this actual Green Book, which Black Americans would use to go to cities and know which bars, restaurants, hotels would be open to them, which
Oh, wow.
would be safe for them to walk into, because at a time, and there's actually one, I don't want to say infamous, I guess is the best word to use. Warren, Michigan was one as well. There's a lot of towns back in the day that were called sundown towns. So basically, you were free to, and free is very stated very lightly in the sentence. You were free to roam around in these towns until the sun went down. And once the sun went down, there it's like the purge. There was no rules.
Oh,
So
wow.
and they talk about this also in the show too. So again, the show kind of teaches you in a fun, interesting kind of way. But yeah, so he highlights a lot of these sundown towns so that when you're driving through the country, or let's say you're going from Mobile to Chicago, you know what cities you have to get through during the day and what cities you're fine to stay in overnight. And I think it's I think it's pretty impactful. One, it's our transit, it's how we're moving from one place to another. It's how tourism, came to be. Especially the interesting thing is like that's how a lot of these cities out west more really grew, right? It's from tourism and people
Mm,
traveling through them. So they didn't want to say no to this part of the population, but they also didn't want to accommodate it as
mm.
much as they could. So it's the Green Book was like basically an almanac for Black Americans for a good period of time. And it's kind of, it's just crazy. Again, I really like suggest that you watch the Lovecraft County episode, because you just like kind of no, I'm a big road trip girl. Like during the summertime, if I have nothing to do on a Saturday, I'm getting in my car and I'll drive like 4 hours up north just to like go to a diner that I heard is really good. Like that. And so watching this and like kind of seeing this historically in context, you're like, wow, I am so privileged, and my ancestors are so privileged to be able to just be like, I'm going to go wherever I want, whenever I want right now, and not have even a doubt in the world that I'm not going to be safe.
Mm.
And to like travel through towns and realize like there's one diner you can go to and another one you can't, and doors you can knock on and others you can't, and some cities that you just can't even drive across like the county line, or else you'll be in some uh, very, very, very bad troubles, then I just think it's a good eye opener for those to kind of see, okay, now imagine our ancestors going through that. Where would I be today if
Mm,
they didn't have that privilege to just travel wherever they wanted to? So yeah, it's very interesting stuff. And you can actually, there's a lot of pages online you can read of the Green Book. That's even more eye opening too. Just kind of the way that it's written and in this form of like, not even like, oh, this sucks that we have to deal with it. It's like, no, hey, you want to travel? Just make sure that you take these steps. And as honestly as a white person, I'm like, that's insane to
mm,
think that there's a large portion of our population who are just reading this and was like, this is fine and this is normal, right?
right.
So yeah, learning from our past, big part of that for sure.
No, that's definitely obviously it's super interesting, but in a way that, hopefully we can reflect on, and then nothing like this hopefully happens again. No, but you've been doing a great job with some of these, and I didn't know that show. I didn't know it was actually a show, so that's I'm going to be bookmarking this and saving it for later. Any other
Yeah.
stories that come to mind that you really enjoyed highlighting?
Yeah, I think the other one too that I touched on prior to that one, and it comes up a little bit in an article I just published today. For those watching, you can go check it out on my feed of all my articles. Is just realizing how our roads were built and
Mm,
like the crucial role that black prisoners in particular played laying our roadways. I mean, there's movement at a time called the Good Roads movement, and it stems from a reading, I believe, where basically the thought is uh from good roads will output good people.
hmm,
So the prison system was like, if we put our prisoners on our roads and have them build them, they'll come out of that experience fixed or less of a criminal than they were before.
interesting.
And it was a way for, especially Georgia was like a big proponent of this, for them to kind of like say like, this is the way that we're going to use this labor. And it was at that time period where it was like, what are people's rights, right? We're like kind of like in this period where there's like a Jim Crow era where there's certain rules and certain unwritten rules that you have to follow. And I would say even to today's prison structure, I mean, a lot of prisoners, just like now, were unfortunately Black Americans. We could spend a whole episode on the systematic injustices in this country. We won't get into that too much, but those chain gangs and the systems that actually helped build a lot of these roads were these individuals. And so it's like, it's interesting to kind of like drive around, especially if you are in Georgia, like some of these old roads, like your possible ancestors helped out of their own will build these,
Mm.
and they weren't treated nice. It was, of course,
Or not their own will. It's
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, out of their own will. Yes, and it wasn't. I mean, they're prisoners. So they, of course, a lot of the beatings that came with slavery and the treatment of during slavery went right into this movement as well. It did get to a point where I think they realized there some of these could be good jobs for
Mm,
people who weren't in prison, and so it started to go from like more of an economic problem and like a racist problem, and then of course the civil rights movement helped kind of end it a little bit more. So clearly, at some point, we started using actual construction companies to build our roads. But for a very long period, I'd say at least a couple of decades, especially the early 1900s, late 1800s, a lot of that was laid by past slaves or those who had unfortunately fallen to the prison system as well. And it's again like it's just something to consider. It's like
mhm.
these small things when people. I'm just gonna say this stuff, and it's like that. Clearly, I'm saying this on behalf of Gray Sharkey, not representing Freightways or anything like that. But I truly, I don't want to say believe because I think it's historical at this point. It's well verse, but the systematic injustices in this country and the privilege aspect that people want to avoid in conversations, like that's there and that's real. And these people went through these things, and is it not a positive thing? Like I was covering a lot of inventors, black inventors, and people along those lines, but it's like I want people to also understand like a lot of our infrastructure and the way our cities are when it comes to gerrymandering and the way our cities are laid out were because of,
Redlining and
yeah, exactly, right. Like it's a lot of it is from segregation. Like there's reasons. I can't remember what comedian said this, like every MLK road or something is like there's reasons that some of these streets are where they are
mm,
in cities, right? And why some school districts are where they are in some cities as well. And I think until we can accept that fact, right, we can't change it. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just covering incredible inventors and individuals in this
agree.
space who've done good things, but like,
The sunshine stories, there's also
yeah,
gotta be the other side of it naturally as well.
yeah, right. So that way it's like, okay, maybe I need to consider, something much deeper and much more historical that's impacted societies over time than just what's happening and what I'm doing today.
Do you have you and I don't know if you've done this yet, but I know that you're pushing these stories out on X slash Twitter and
Yeah.
also LinkedIn. Do you have and I don't know if you've done this, but maybe just a suggestion because I would love to be able to share all of them, but maybe throw them all in like the same thread or something like that would be really really helpful because then I could I would link to each one of them, of course, but I think it would be really cool to be able to have like one thread of like all of the stories that you put out over the last month and be able to use that as almost like a bookmark to be able to reference in
Yeah.
the future.
I honestly haven't, but I love that thought, and so today I will do that. I'll make sure
Awesome.
I'll post a thread of it on Twitter so everyone can check those out there. Then if you're like on my LinkedIn, if you go to my recent posts, it's most of those too. So you can see those there. I
Awesome.
believe actually we've also been sharing them a little bit in our Freightways Classic newsletters. So if you
Oh,
guys get
nice.
those, you've seen at least a couple of them through there too.
Perfect. I'm making a note to myself to because when this show
Yeah.
we typically record it the Thursday before the Tuesday release, just sort of housekeeping notes for folks out there. And so next Tuesday when this actually posts, hopefully we can have a link to that thread so you can go through and you can read all of them in order to really get the full digest of everything that you missed over the last month and probably missed over your entire lifetime not knowing these stories. So good, kudos
Yeah.
to you. Great job on that. Now let's move into I don't know how to segue into this next segment because I guess we're gonna no, I don't know how to segue, so I'm just gonna do like a hard shift
Yeah,
into
exactly. Yeah, I
into
have
this
no idea
next story.
which story are you gonna go into? Yeah,
We're
no.
gonna go into Baxter Bailey.
Yeah, okay,
So
cool. Yeah,
it was a little bit of a difficult transition there. I'm
yeah,
not I don't have the words to say that where it's not offensive.
right.
So this is typically when we talk about cargo crime. So
Yeah. The
yeah.
aftermath.
So
The aftermath
the
of cargo
seriousness,
crime.
yeah, of course, I definitely want to be serious. But moving into, sort of I don't this isn't even really like lighter topic because this is you brought something to my attention last night before we start recording this show, and I had never heard of this company before. But it's called Baxter Bailey. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what this company is and what they do?
Okay, so they are the best way to explain is they are a collections company. So carriers who have unpaid invoices and aren't hearing from bond companies. A lot of times, right, the carrier will start with a bond, they'll go there if they're having problems there, then they'll go to Baxter Bailey or some type of collections company. Baxter's the one I've probably dealt with the most in my career. And I'm going to tell you how I know them because I don't want you to think that the company I worked for in the past doesn't pay their bills because that's not what happened. And I'm sure a lot of you might have dealt with Baxter Bailey under the same situations that I have. But they, for us and for me, they were our cue that we were dealing a lot of times with a double broker
Hmm.
situation. So for all those, yeah, Baxter Bailey is a collections agency, but
With an
they,
incredible website. I'm just gonna bring this
yeah,
up because they have the
yes,
dollar bill just burning in
so good.
flames.
And d- oh, I can swear they don't give a fuck, dude. Like and it's I started I when I first figured out who these guys were, hated them. I was just like, you bastards. But the longer I worked with them, and this is like brokers out there listening, here's some like tips if you aren't already doing this. The more I started to realize, like, oh, these guys like know who the bad guys are in this industry.
Mm.
They know who's not paying their bills. I mean, let's just shit on them now. Okay, go to I think it's the top debtors, right? At the top.
Oh, which is just an
Yeah.
incredible call out. So for for folks
Yeah.
who are just listening and that you're not exactly sure like what we're showing on the screen right now, it's a dollar bill that's going up in flames. It's Baxter Bailey's website, but they have a few different service offerings. They have flash alerts, debtor profiles, broker trends. Basically, they have almost like a membership model where they give you a little bit of information for free, and then you got to sign up in order to get the rest of it. So from what you're saying, and then I kind of, how I'm sort of deciphering of how they're making money, is they basically will help carriers and shippers avoid the bad brokers. Am I understanding that correctly?
And more so the carriers. So they're trucking focused exclusively, and so basically a carrier will come to them and say, "Listen, I've got $2,000 in invoices. I can't collect from these guys. I will give you 10% or so to collect it for me. So at
Hmm.
least I'm not fully out of pocket." And there's someone who, I mean, we all know trucking companies, especially mom and pop shops, like, you don't have the time to be berating some of these and you're probably not getting anywhere. That's what a lot of times people turn to Baxter when it's like, I've had no choice. This is like, these guys know what they're doing, so we're going to jump into it. And they do know what they're doing, because once you hear from them, it's like basically like, here's what's happening and tell us ASAP what you want to do about it, or else we're just gonna keep this I don't want to say bully train, because they are collecting from, they're representing carriers, and I think in a really great way. uh there have been some complaints, I think, from carriers, right, that they take a margin, but that's kind of the point. You have to run a business.
Right.
But from my experience, the first time I learned about them, I actually heard about it through my shipper. So there was a customer of ours who reached out to me and said, "Hey, Grace, all of these like 6 loads you did for us in this lane. I'm being told that the carrier was never paid for any of them." And I'm like, "Well, that's crazy." Like, especially if I remember it happened like a year prior. So I'm like, there's no way that we've gone 365 days without paying anyone. And so I go to pull up the load and get the paperwork, and I get the email forward from me, because, as you all know, at the end of the day, if a broker doesn't pay, who's ever on that BOL, the shipper can be looked at as the payee to the carrier. That's why IKEA is suing Convoy, right? Because they're like, no, we already paid you for this.
Hmm.
And so my shipper sent me all this info over, and basically they couldn't figure out exactly who had brokered the load. They couldn't figure out I was a part of it. So that's why they went directly to the shipper. And then they came to us and said, "Hey, we have all these invoices that are unpaid. And then I came back and said, we paid this carrier, ended up being a double broker situation. So the carrier who I thought we paid, of course, actually didn't move the load, and it actually sold it for like a lot more than it was supposed to be. So like the invoices were like double what they should have been. You legally don't have to pay the higher amount. You have to pay exactly, you only have to pay what you actually charge the double broker.
Hmm.
So that kind of sucks for the carrier. But like, there's been multiple times where, even if even sometimes when carriers were in the wrong, they would turn to Baxter and be like, "Hey, we're going to go after the shipper if you don't get us this information," or like, they will attack you and go after you, and they have no problem calling your customer and being like, "These guys are doing a bad job." And at first, they were bullies, but then after a while, I started actually using them and their resources for our own accounting department.
Hmm.
So if you do work with them, I believe it's every I want to say it's weekly, like every Friday or something, they send out a list of new debtors and top debtors to everyone. And I would forward that list over to our accounting department and they would go through and if those carriers or those brokers and honestly, sometimes there'd be shippers on there too, go through and we mark them off as do not use so
Hmm.
that at some point we don't get ourselves stuck in a situation where we paid the wrong carrier or wrong logistics company and from there. So I as much as they are bullies, I think the way that you like spin it on them is use the resources. And if you want to bring up that top debtor list, I mean, it's funny going through that and like knowing like think of what we've reported at FreightWaves, like a lot of one of
So
them.
well, there's real quick because
Yeah,
with you mentioning the bully aspect of it, there's this
they
part
do.
right here that says a broker warning on the site is, I think, from a marketing perspective and from a collections perspective, very powerful.
Yeah.
So if you're just listening, this is basically you have a typical website landing page, but in the upper right hand corner in bright red, they say new, and it lists, a trucking company and their DOT and their MC number, their address, their phone number, and they tell it, they basically say this is the new broker warning. Call, this phone number for more info. And so they're basically, just putting this broker right on blast, right in front of for everyone to see. But then to your point, they have another page that is
I love
just
this.
and it almost is like guns a blazing because they have a list of the latest top debtors, and they have how many companies? They have 20 companies that they're going to show you for free before you got to pay for the rest of the list. And it's interesting to watch this list move up and down, especially for some companies on here that look a little familiar.
Yeah, a couple. Oh my god, one did move down, right, from even last night. That's funny because so yeah, we're going over this. Yeah, especially because like my favorite yellow is in there, right? The Overland Park
Yellow,
Yellow Logistics.
Convoy, Surge.
So, but somehow Surge is still doing worse than Yellow, which is like crazy to me, right? Like, Convoy's on there too. Yeah, so it's like so for any brokers out there, like if you're trying to avoid double brokering or any issues, like I would go through and all the MCs are right there. But have your carrier. I'm sure one of you guys got a carrier intern. Have them go through, mark them as do not use. Say they are known for non-payment, and then you save yourself a headache down the road. And trust me, if they're in this top 20 list, we all know how many companies are in here between like brokers and of course all the fraudulent ones out there. Like, yeah, they're probably not the best to use at this point in time.
And I'm curious because if you so well, my favorite part
Yeah,
about
are you
this
talking about the pool one? Yeah.
well, so they it's not it's yeah, so I clicked on the top one. So inline brokerage has the top spot as of recording for this. Because I was curious if they actually like show the amount that's owed or any kind of further information. But they just give sort of the general overview information of their address, their phone number, DOT, MC, some CTAs, to join, and so you can see the rest of the information. But then they have a map of the listing of where this company is, and they even put a caption on the image, and it says, why the map? If one books a load with a broker, a nice house with a pool might be a clue that something is not right. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that that's referring to, maybe sort of brokerages that are run out of a house, or maybe a double
Yeah.
brokering situation. But I am curious as to, so this solution is more for after the effect. So like Carrier Sure, Highway, these types of companies are more for before booking the load, and then Baxter Bailey is, you know, after you've done all, everything's been moved, and so you got to actually collect on that bill. Am I understanding
Yes.
that right?
Yeah, that's what they make their money off of at the end of the day is the actual like bill collecting aspect of it. But it is like funny to kind of like look at all of these resources they have and it's like I mean
They found a
it's like
niche, and ooh boy,
yeah,
that's a good
for
niche.
sure. I mean, it's like it should be a step in. Here I go again, giving out good ideas to people. I mean, for like the highways and the carrier shares, like, are you linked up with them? Like, do you have an API connection with them, so that people can know, okay, like they don't pay their bills, like, and this
Mm.
is probably the easiest way to figure that out because if they're being sought after by bill collectors, they're probably not paying their bills, right? So um there goes.
That's a really good idea.
Hey, yeah, Jordan Grass
You
steals
should
that.
probably, yeah, if you
Yeah.
see any of those folks,
Cassandra
somehow
Gaines, I swear to God. I can't. I told someone I was like, sometimes these interviews, I just like give these guys great ideas, and I'm like, nope, there we go again.
yeah. Like, just played myself, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, while we're on the topic of, sort of, I guess, identifying like good freight brokerages and how they should, good carriers, that's sort of been the theme so far of this show. I did want to
True.
highlight Carrie Jablonski. She is a CEO over at Trucker Tools, and she's been dropping some really great insights, some really great knowledge over the last few weeks. She's really like stepped up her social media game. Like she was on these, LinkedIn and Twitter, of course, but she started really like focusing in on, the insights that she's getting from a lot of different customer visits. And so I'm bringing up this LinkedIn post here. And she says, I've talked to over 100 brokerage leadership teams over the last 6 months, 100 brokerage leadership teams over the last 6 months, and wanted to share some common themes along with the most successful that have allowed them to scale growing net revenue despite the abysmal freight market we're in. And so a few of the different takeaways that she has from those 100 brokerage leadership teams is: number one, the riches are in the niches. Number two, KPI driven hiring. Number three, focusing on carrier reuse. And number four, outsourcing technology. And then there was a lot of really great comments that really highlighted a lot of the different things, and further commenting on what she's seen throughout the industry. So it's just really cool insight and really interesting insight as you have a CEO in Carrie that is obviously really dedicated to truckers, and then just trying to figure out how to make that relationship a little bit better with all of the partners that these different carriers are using. And so with her in particular, I thought that it was really great insight to hear and to see that she's dropping this knowledge, not just on LinkedIn, but she's dropping it over on Twitter/X as well. So if you're on the fence about joining that platform, I would highly recommend also joining, but also giving her a follow, because this is just one of several posts that I've seen from her, where she's dropping this kind of insight where we don't really have this sort of collective insight. And there are companies like ISO that are trying to solve this. Was it Kevin Hill's Brush Pass Research is
Yeah.
also trying to solve it as well from the brokerage aspect, just shining a light a little bit more into that sector of the business where I think for even myself, just, working inside of an asset-based freight brokerage for years, I never really knew about any of the other silos within logistics. And so maybe that's the case for other folks that are working at, within other silos within the industry. But I just thought, I just wanted to share that as, we're kind of like talking about, ways to improve so far with, and, just highlighting different stories that probably need to be highlighted. That this was one too that I wanted to shine a light on.
Yeah, that especially I will say her third point too, like focus on carrier reuse. That I for especially like all of these spot brokers out there, like I think when we talk about risk in this industry, when we talk about like, of course, like dealing with these ups and downs and flows of the market, and I've noticed like that being pushed around a lot recently on LinkedIn, just as like an overall thought, and I'm like 100% behind it. I think
Mm.
a lot of people aren't don't look at those metrics or even know how to pull those metrics. I mean, it took when I was working in the space like years for me to realize that first of all our TMS could pull that, but secondly like what that meant. And I think at like some point we realized like 86% of the carriers we only used once.
Wow.
And yeah, which is like kind of crazy because what you want to start where at least my brain starts to go then is like, okay, so what's that adding to the jobs of the AP department and having to set up a new vendor every
Carrier
single time?
relations
Carrier
and
relations, how much time are we building? Where it's like you want to know how RXO is automating so many of their loads. You want to know how Convoy is automating so many of their loads. It's because they're giving the carrier the same load the load to the same carrier every single time.
mm,
And much like anything else that you do, like the more that you build that relationship and work over and over again, then that's when on time numbers start to go up. That's when your customers happy because they're seeing the same friendly face every single time, every Monday morning, right? Like it's so I I really wonder and like hope that companies are starting to look at that a little bit more and realize like what stems off of that too. And not, of course, Trucker Tools benefits off of you having that conversation a little bit, but still it's like so many problems I hear in this industry, daily problems that we're trying to fix with automation. It's just like get off these load boards and start building relationships with carriers. Jeez,
Well,
I don't.
that's what, Reed over at Lost Freight, that's what he says, that,
Yes.
that the best freight never makes it to a load board. So
Yeah.
send a truck
Yes.
list instead. So it's all, it feels like we're sort of in like an not just a technology renaissance over the last handful of years in freight, but also an information renaissance where it's just sort of combining, and the greater information, that sort of the thought process of, well, we've always done it this way. Well, maybe that way it should evolve into adopting some of these things that, if you make, as much as people make fun of Convoy, they really brought the digital freight brokerage concept to the, sort of the mainstream. And so a lot more companies have been forced to update their technology, and it's probably for the betterment of the overall industry. Now we have a slew of podcasts and email newsletters and shows that are dedicated to shining a light on these different solutions and different ways of thinking. But I just love that it comes back down to, someone just having the conversations, talking to 100 different brokerages, and this is what she's seeing. And so just,
Mhm.
kudos to her. And, it's a good way to, by the time this show airs, it's a good way to kick off, Women's History Month, is
True.
highlighting, the women who are doing the work behind the scenes, that are doing the work first and foremost, that just also happen to be a woman. So I always want to give women their flowers, 12 months out of the year. But that's definitely a good way to kick off the month.
Yeah, no, she's a really great one. I think that's I don't want to say up and coming, but like really starting to, I feel like, get into her groove of
Mhm.
like taking becoming more of like a figure in this space
A
as well.
thought leader, and
Yes,
she's
yeah,
putting in the work, which I love. A lot of people will go out there and they'll spout off their expertise before they've put in any
yeah.
work, but she's the one doing it behind the scenes, and she's been on that CEO job for about, what, 2
Yeah.
years now?
Hmm.
So she's only just now starting to really speak on the industry. So that I think it's really cool to see.
Yeah, good job. Good hire, Prasad.
Yes, co-sign that one as well. Okay, so let's get into the next segment, and that is favorite businesses that are going on in freight. It could be SaaS, it could be a, sort of a side quest, it could be a company that we're seeing. We've already kind of mentioned a few of those. I'm not sure if you have one for this particular segment, but I got a good one, in case you want me to get that started.
I'll let you go first.
All right, let me find the video. And I am because I have been on a little bit of a kick on I guess to sort of set this up properly. I have been, and I guess, sort of echoing a little bit of what I just said about, working in this particular 3PL asset based silo. This podcast has really afforded me the luxury of talking to experts from throughout a variety of the silos within logistics. And that's sort of the goal of the show, is to break down those information silos and to really spread further awareness. And one of those aspects that I haven't really touched on is the manufacturing side of logistics. But there was a video that I watched recently. It's about the future of American manufacturing, because obviously we all know that in this country, it was really within the 90s and the early 2000s that we had a really before that, we had a really strong manufacturing hub within this country. But then a lot of it started to be offloaded and offshored, to China, to a lot of East Asian countries. And that's where a lot of our manufacturing still lives. Well, COVID was a big eye opener, and that we shouldn't probably consolidate all of our manufacturing within one country, within one government. It should be a little bit diversified.
Yeah.
There was, an example that we had here, just in sort of like closer to home, a few years ago, when Hurricane Maria, I think that was the name of the hurricane, but that Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico
Mm,
manufactures anywhere from 85 to 90% of the world's supply of IV bags. And so when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto
wow.
Rico, it wiped out all of that manufacturing. And so you have a situation where one country is affected and it impacts the entire globe in a very serious way.
Yeah.
And so I've just been sort of fascinated as to how that could possibly happen from just a business standpoint. Why? I mean, I guess from a business standpoint is the reason we got into this mess is, they're thinking of, well, let's just consolidate and put it all in one place. And then you find out why that's such a terrible idea. So now with all of this talk of manufacturing coming back to the United States, what does that look like? Is it going to be the steel mills that that we saw in sort of
Mm.
Pennsylvania, West Virginia type places? Or is that coming back, or is it sort of a new way of thinking about manufacturing? And I tend to lean more towards, especially after watching a few internet educated YouTube videos, I tend to think that it needs to be the newer version of what manufacturing looks like. And so this company called Hadrian is really, really fascinating because what they're doing is they're trying to implement the software side of things with manufacturing. And I know you're probably people who are in manufacturing, they're going to hear, they're going to roll their eyes about trying to add, technology into manufacturing because it's probably what we hear about when it comes to any of these industries. But with the CHIPS Act coming here, we have the infrastructure bill. There's a lot of different ways that we should be sort of investing in our manufacturing, how we're just thinking about what that process looks like. So this company, I'm going to play a short clip of what they're trying to do. And I think I'm going to play it from right here. So hopefully we can hear it.
Realizes something and then it zooms out to the earth and then it comes back in. I had one of those moments and I was like, oh God, this is how the whole thing works.
This is Chris Powell. He's the founder of Hadrian Automation, a young company based in Los Angeles that's aiming to change how manufacturing works in America. He's already built one automated facility, but that's just the start.
The true difficulty is building the next machine. In other words, building the factory.
Hadrian is trying to build the factories of the future.
The real problem is that America's greatest companies are resting on this house of cards of 40,000 small business owners, propping up the aerospace and defense industry. And now they're just old and retiring, taking all their knowledge with them, and there's no one to replace them.
American manufacturing has a huge problem.
Primarily because in the 80s and 90s, we outsourced manufacturing, we decimated the Midwest. Now it's called the Rust Belt for a reason.
But Chris has a unique strategy for how to solve it.
Our task has been to rebuild the future on a stronger foundation than we had before.
So Hadrian's vision is to basically reindustrialize America. And the way we're doing that is building automated factories for space and defense. I don't think you get the Jetsons flying car future in a Western-led system without something like a Hadrian. And we're trying to build it as fast as possible.
So that's just a little bit of a snippet of what they're
Look at
trying.
dude's energy, by the way.
He's we talked about this beforehand. It's very much I'm currently obsessed with a CEO by the name of Palmer Luckey, and when I have been watching a ton of his videos, he's like an aerospace manufacturer, Department of Defense, trying to be a Department of Defense contractor, co-founder of Oculus, also co-founder of a new company called Anduril. Not really new, but they've been around for a few years now. But he very much reminds me of that. And so with knowing all that, I wanted to pull out a couple more quotes because that video is really, really long. It comes from John Coogan, who really has a ton of really, really great sort of documentary style YouTube videos. He's a former VC kind of guy. Now he's making content and covering a lot of these different types of stories. And this one is just really fascinating to me because he says you cannot put SaaS software into industrial companies. You need to vertically integrate a software company within the industrial company. And so when he started up this company, in 2020, it's with the goal of building automated factories. And you can kind of tell by the accent that he's not from the US. He's actually Australian based. But when he was working for an e-commerce company, he moved to the United States. And basically, this is where he sort of got his feet wet when it comes to manufacturing and sort of the inefficiencies that are involved in that process. So he started cold DMing on LinkedIn, cold calling a lot of different manufacturers all over the country. He said that he would call 100 in a day. He would visit 3 per week. And he just did this over and over, sort of going back to what Carrie did, doing that due diligence and having the conversations. Stuff like that is not scalable, but he's having those conversations in order to build something that is scalable. So what he heard whenever he's having all of this, actually, let me take that back. He'd call 10 per day, not 100. He'd call 10 per day and visit with 3 per week, which is still, impressive numbers, especially visiting in person 3 per week. And he was doing this in the height of COVID. And he says during that, sort of that video is that he was flying in airplanes when there was like one other person on a Delta flight at a time. So he
Oh
was
my
willing
God.
to, and
I wish.
well, his thought process is that, either COVID will kill me during this process, but he was so determined that he was willing to take that risk in order to have these conversations and really focus on what he was going to build next. And what he heard is that from all of these different folks is that the supply chain is fragmented, the customer experience is terrible, everyone is 55 to 65 years old, and it's a highly technical industry, and there's no real reason why software and robotics hasn't been put into place. These were the concepts
Yes.
that these companies were telling him. And so that's the reason why he started his manufacturing company, but he wanted to pick a lane that was high margin and high precision. And so he picked aerospace manufacturing as far as like his entry into the manufacturing world. And so he said, starting
Right.
here can lead to revenue to fund the next manufacturing facility. So he starts realizing the need to partner with existing suppliers, and he uses them as the way to vertically integrate software and automation. And what I think is the coolest part of the way that he's doing this is that they have different teams that are set up throughout his automation facility. And if you missed it in that clip, Elon Musk is talking about, it's a very brief clip, but he says, the problem isn't necessarily building the product; it's building the machine that builds the product. And so that's what
Yeah.
Hadrian is focused on: is building the machine that builds the product. And so what they do is they take an industry veteran that has been, they have all of this subject matter expertise all up in their head. And so what they're doing is they're pairing one of those guys and they're pairing them with a software engineer. And so the software engineer and them work in tandem on different aspects of the manufacturing process. And so that if something is able to be automated, they can do that through software. And so what I mean by that is building the machine that builds the machine, but also building the process in which you find out what contracts to even go after. So they
Yeah.
started building that kind of software, asking, basically it would sort through and it would scan all of these different government contracts that were put out for suppliers to try to bid on. And so what they would do is they would filter through all of those different things. Then they would build it into a system of, can we build this ourselves? What does that look like? What does the revenue look like? And it spits this kind of information out in minutes. And so you're then combining those tandem software plus industry expert, you're pairing them together in order to bring that product to life, bring it to fruition, so that it's not only the product that you're building, but you're developing a supply chain ecosystem where these factories are located in the United States. You can, have a lot of safeguards from a security perspective. It was just really, really exciting in order to see the approach that they're taking with it, and little things that I would have not even thought of. So the machine that builds the machine, they have different tools that are on the machine that builds the machine. And after every time that little part is used, think of like a giant, like Phillips head screwdriver that's designed to, do something. I don't know the extent of like that part of it. But that Phillips head screwdriver is normal wear and tear will happen after you make a long period of products, or a certain amount of products, I should say. And so the wear and tear on that device will affect future products that you make. And with aerospace engineering, you have to be like a fraction of a hair within a hair of
Yeah.
making sure that these parts are good enough to go into these different types of machinery, different type of weapons, planes, systems, stuff like that, to keep the country safe. And so what they do is they scan the tool before it starts the manufacturing process, and then they scan it afterwards. And so then that way they can have a realistic timeline of how long that tool that's going to help the machine build the product, so that tool doesn't go down, because currently in our
Yeah.
manufacturing system that does not exist. And so being able to scan it before, what would happen is that the tool would just go down. Then you would have to, find a supplier that builds the tool that for the machine that builds the product. So as you can see, like it's if there is a problem with the original tool, then it's going to create this downstream effect where you get the product, you get the products later. It takes months in order to fulfill, some of these tools within the machine that builds the product. And so it's just a recipe for disaster. And so what his machinery does is it actually scans the tools in advance before and after they've been put to work in order to figure out what that lifeline looks like and get that product in before that tool goes down. So then that way you have a more efficient supply chain, and that, you can kind of keep all of those a little bit more contained. Then there's also from the standpoint of like American security. There's, going off on a little bit of another tangent, there's all of this sort of colonialism that's going on the moon. So on the moon, you
Oh my
have,
God, yes. I love
I know we're going in a
I
lot
love
of
when
this.
no, it's funny though. No, keep going. I do have something to add to this, but no, I love this. I love this switcheroo though.
Okay,
Yes, tell us about our moon villages.
okay, so moon logistics. Basically, what is going on
So
the
good.
moon is that the global order of everybody who essentially goes to the moon has set up different rules and parameters. Where if you set up a base on the moon, nobody else can set up a base within 500 miles of your base. So once you sort of claim it and you put your flag in the dust of the moon, then nobody else can build that
Yes.
within 500 miles of that. And so right now there's just a race to get to the moon as quick as possible, to lay your sort of, stake in the ground, and that's your area, and
Moonbot.
no other country can come in and take it. Because what happens is that, when you land, when you take off, when you're doing, sort of experiments on the moon, it kicks up a lot of moon dust, and the justification behind it is that, we don't want your dust interfering with our experiments over here. But the other problem with it is that on the moon in particular, there's very limited sunlight at any given time, just because of the nature of the rotation of the moon relative to the earth, relative to the sun. So there's really a very small window of time that you have light on the moon. And so what happens from a national security perspective is that the dark side of the moon is they made a song of it for a reason. And so you have the dark side of the moon, where a lot of these different rovers, apparently a Chinese nuclear powered rover in particular, can
Yes.
operate on the dark side of the moon, and no one knows where it's going. No one knows what it's doing. It can essentially just operate in silence. And so going back to Chris Power of Hadrian, he's building this sort of, aerospace, manufacturing automation in order to not only help American manufacturing, but also from a national security perspective, where we should probably know if there's, a nuke rover running around on Mars or running around on the moon. And, maybe we should have a little bit more intelligence to that, or maybe we should have our own in order, to sort of combat this. The best deterrent to war is essentially making sure that doesn't happen. And that's by showing off your weapons and showing off your capabilities in order to deter other opponents from thinking that you are a weak party. So it's really like this grandiose thinking, not grandiose, but these big problems that I'm fascinated by when entrepreneurs are trying to solve them. And so the big problems like that. So I think that is really just sort of cool that, we have these entrepreneurs like a Palmer Luckey, like a Chris Power, that are seeing these big problems. And instead of going through the normal sort of government bureaucracy and the normal way of doing things, they're coming in with a fresh pair of eyes. They're having the conversations, and they're coming up with the solutions in order to combat some of this, in order to sort of, because obviously, with America, we have, we've talked earlier, we have obviously our issues from a historical perspective, that we haven't been the best leaders that we should, but the American exceptionalism is something that should still be revered, and still be something that we strive to, is to get better as a country. And so that's why I wanted to highlight this company, and to talk about sort of the greater ethos of just trying to solve the big problems and doing it in a really fascinating way. So that's my spiel. So kudos to them.
Yeah, I don't have my own, but I'm gonna piggyback off this. And when you're talking, I was trying to figure out the companies, because I completely agree with this problem. I think and this is, by the time this comes out, and people already kind of know about it anyways. Just so that people know, kind of out there, I'm going to be lowering my radio time here shortly to only a few days a week. And part of the reason I'm very excited about that is just because it's going to give me an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into some of these technology providers. I mean, like this one in particular, like this is really cool. I want to reach out to this guy.
Awesome.
But a lot of these technologies that aren't as flashy, or maybe like behind the scenes more than people understand. What's really interesting about this is that he's 100% right, and especially you bring up, right, is like how are we building these robotics, these automation tools that are going to even be there to help build a lot of these things. And a big part of all of this discussion is something that, I mean, I don't want to get to the political side of this, but a lot of this has to do with employment and a ton of jobs that I need to be filled in order. Like that's why we're looking to automate, in particular, a lot of these manufacturing sites, because they're jobs that people just don't want, or I don't want to
The
say aren't
workforce is
qualified.
older too, and that's
Yes,
you don't
yeah,
wanna lose that knowledge of
yes,
these skilled tradesmen who have been doing this for a long time. So how do we pair
exactly.
technology, in order to solve that? Because his argument is that we need to speed up the lead time in American automation and manufacturing, and we need to do it like yesterday, or it's
Yeah.
gonna remain a problem for both supply chains and, more importantly, national security.
Yeah, so there's a few companies I've written about in the past I kind of want to bring up in this discussion. One of them, to go to like more of the automation side, right? So like the work that he's doing, let's say that he gets these robots going, or even let's bring up a few of the robotic companies that are out there that we write about at Freightways, right? Like Locust Robotics, Six River Systems, things of that nature. So like there's a huge demand for that kind of stuff in warehouses in particular. Now, a lot of the problems is, and this goes into, I'm sure, the work that he's doing in these calls he's making too, is that like they're not they don't easily integrate into the same systems together, right? So it's kind of like, and if you're more of a broker person in here, it's like you make all these investments to still have 2,000 tabs open on your computer, right? Well, that's not really helping the problem. There's a company I covered a while ago. Again, now I'm going to have some more free time to like follow up with these people, called SVT Robotics. And they were looking at themselves, and their platform was called, I think, SoftBot. And their main goal was to make the integration of these automation systems easier, right?
Mhm.
Like that alone is a big problem, part of all of this. And they were basically trying to become like what they call like the USB of automation integrations, right? So long history, we can talk about it at a different time, but the USB was created to make it so that computers were easy to have and easy to invest in as a normal uh, computer at home person. Like back when the computers first came out, there was a different cord. Funny how Apple's making this happen again, but there was a different cord for every single application, every different one for the mouse, a different one. So you had to spend a lot of money to get a computer. So as soon as they figured out how to make the USB, now you can plug all of your tools, even this microphone, right into your computer. And now it made sense to invest in one because it was easier to use. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of what they're doing with automation, is like a big part of it is like, who are these integrators going to be? We don't have enough people to fill those jobs with how much people want to invest in it, and I'm sure hire someone like him to help with their manufacturing. But we don't have enough people to kind of like who's going to guard the guards, like who's going to run the robots,
Mm.
right? And so making that easier, so that investment becomes better as well. Another company in particular, because you were bringing up even like being able to take photos and like understand when this equipment's going to be down, a company called Go Expedi, GOXPED, sorry, XPEDI. They're doing the same exact thing for heavy industry equipment. So it was started by a guy who like worked for a huge Chinese like some type of like energy company. And like, for instance, right now, and thank God we got enough inventory, but like right now, most US oil factories are down because this is the time of the year where they're replacing their equipment.
Hmm.
Oh, perfect. Got it up. And so what they do is they work with companies to create a very fast supply chain so that when that manufacturing equipment goes down, they can easily bring in some new ones and get things fixed faster. And because they realize like the downtime, or like you said, like knowing prior to when that screw is going to like actually stop working and your line would be shut down, like they want to be proactive about that and get that done faster. So it's like we talk about like everything is logistics, right? Like there's so many I love stuff like this because it's like, okay, that you're solving a problem that's definitely out there. That downtime in any heavy industry is like, we're talking GDP dollars disruptive. Like, so to see how quickly you can get like a big part to you, not only before something happens, like that proactiveness of a lot of like what he's doing that you just went through, is pretty huge. So yeah, let me know if you want to talk to these guys. They
Yeah,
definitely,
that sounds super cool. And this is, I mean, these kinds of conversations, like I just don't think that are happening enough. I thought,
especially like we just did a bunch of trade shows, right? It's like, or industry shows, and it's like, how much did this come up? Like, not at
not at
all.
all. Not one conversation did this come up. And to go back to Hadrian for a minute. Now he's focused on, sort of the high margin and high precision right now. And so
Yeah,
his goal is to take this model and apply it to other types of manufacturing within the United States. I believe he has 2 facilities right now, but he's also planning for demand as well. And so he's planning on opening up more facilities in the future. But I just think it's one of those things that you don't even think about. Like nobody even talks about that side of the coin. And so, sort of going back to, the ISO scores that we were
yeah,
referring to earlier, where, a lot of carriers were getting the blame on, loads being delivered late, when come to find out it might be on the retailer or the shipper side of things.
yeah,
And so if you have, sort of greater eyes on these problems that have downstream effects, maybe we can
yeah.
start to set some baselines on what to expect in the new era of American manufacturing. So I thought, obviously shout out to Hadrian for that part of the process and trying to fix, sort of the broken supply chain or the fragmented supply chain. And then also, just sort of the big thinkers out there. I did
I,
have a couple.
I want to say quickly too, big lesson from this story is, if you are a young woman or you have a young daughter right now, put that girl in engineering or manufacturing. Get
Yes,
her to like science,
yes.
okay? I couldn't get physics to work in my brain because I hated it, but like we just listed off 4 different areas where you're going to make a lot of money one day if you just focus on that engineering aspect. So it's women in STEM.
And that's, yes, I absolutely co-sign that. And I think, anytime we talk about automation, there's always the caveat of like, oh, everybody's going to lose their jobs and things like that. It's like,
No,
no, jobs evolve.
they're going to
Uh,
lose their jobs if this job isn't filled. It's like,
Exactly. We're losing our jobs already, to overseas manufacturers and things like that. But for the betterment of American exceptionalism, for the betterment of, sort of your neighbors and, just the overall future of your children and things like that. No, I definitely agree. Start investing in some of these careers especially from a trade perspective, because that's going to be the most safe from any kind of knowledge work, AI
yeah,
work that's going to really consume a lot of us in the next, sort of probably 2 to 5 years. Going to come a lot quicker than you think. But as jobs are replaced or evolve, then you can stay ahead of it and you can learn these things and see these market shifts and be able to evolve with it. A social media coordinator job did not exist 15 years ago, but it is very prominent role today. There are a lot of other different roles. Autonomous truck driver. I know it's gonna to piss off some people that I said that, but autonomous truck driver did not exist 10 years ago. But that role exists today and it's paid very well. So if you're looking at where the trends and sort of these different, I guess, industrial type industries are concerned, like tech is here, it's not going anywhere. The cat is out of the bag, and so either you want to learn with it and grow with it and evolve with it, or you're probably not going to have a good time.
Yeah,
I guess
true.
one more little thing that I did want to bring up because it's a little bit more of a lighter one. Just we're talking about like existential crises and a lot of different themes throughout this show, but I did want to also give a shout out for another source to porch segment that I was going to do, and that's on the company called Goldbelly. Have you heard of them?
No.
Goldbelly they saved me on Valentine's Day because I was traveling. I had to go out
Oh, no.
for a conference, and Goldbelly, I definitely have to shout
Oh my
this
God,
out because
stop.
they saved me with a food delivery. So a food delivery company, but they specialize in restaurants and shops that you have visited and you have ate at before, maybe in New York, maybe in Detroit, maybe in Chicago, some of these different places. Philly is another one. Maybe you've went to one of those really, really great shops and had a famous meal, like I don't know, like a lobster roll or a salmon bagel or a Philly cheesesteak, something like that. So maybe you've had
Yeah.
something from one of these places and you really would
Oh,
love to
no.
have that again. Well, this company can help solve that problem for you. They helped solve it for me. So I just did my first order with them. I ordered the New York bagel brunch package for 6. So what you do is you order from this company, they
What?
deliver it the same day. So you place
No,
your order like a
same
couple days in
day?
advance. So I placed it on like February 11th. And I was like, because me and my fiance, we've been to New York before. We had an amazing trip there. And one of my favorite moments from that trip is like us sitting on a bench overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. We're eating a salmon bagel. It was a really great moment. And so for Valentine's Day, I was like, it would be great to, sort of send him a
Yeah.
memory from that trip. And so I sent him this bagel box, and it includes the salmon, it includes the bagels, it includes the cream cheese, and they're all from like the New York, New Jersey area, so they're legit. Can't find a good bagel in Jacksonville to save my life, or really anywhere outside of New York, like New Jersey area. So I was able to ship this out to him, and he had it the day before. It took they ship it the same day, so it's not like you're worried about like quality issues or anything like that. But if
Whoa.
you have a craving for maybe like a Philly cheesesteak from Pat's, or there's also like the Detroit style pizza
Yeah, I
that you can
saw
get
Barefoot
from.
Contessa, you can get one of her cakes.
It
Oh
is,
my
I mean, it's
goodness.
really incredible. And it was, to put it in, it's obviously a little bit pricey because you're shipping next day air, but from a gift perspective, I think that this is so
Cool.
genius that you can get a deep dish pizza mailed to you the same day. And they have different instructions too. If you wanted to, obviously like pizza, it's not going to come hot. Like you're going to have to heat that up. But they Goldbelly partners with these different restaurants in order to ship out the local food to people who have maybe visited the city before or maybe just never tried it and heard about it and want to try it. So I just thought that was a really cool concept. So from a logistics perspective, that's a lot of moving parts. And I think that, a Taste of New York, that's actually awesome. Taste of New York weekender box, they're going to send you, looks like
Yeah.
cheesecake, pizza, and then also bagels too. So that's for $250. So that's a little pricey, but that is a lot of food.
Well, it's
For 250.
Shake Shack 8-pack Shake Shack burgers from, it says New York, $60. That's not bad.
And especially considering you're getting it the same day.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
You're
just
probably spending $20 anyways as one person.
so it was funny. We had Dan Reese, who is VP of sales over at Manifest. We had him on the show recently. We bonded a little bit over New York bagels. And so when I posted a clip from it, or I should say, shout out to Lindsay if you're listening. She's my marketing assistant, in case you are tired, or maybe you really like seeing all the video clips that we've been posting out to social media. She is the one responsible for all of that. So thank you to her. But one of those clips that she posted for me was talking about that bagel clip from Dan Reese. And so one of the commenters, Wasi Munair, who owns Munair Group, which is a supply chain sort of talent recruiting company, he's from New Jersey, and he was talking about, I would kill to have, one of those bagels delivered to me. And I told him about this company, and he ordered the same day. And so now, just a couple days later, he has a craving for, some food from back home, and he's able to get that delivered, which I think is just astounding that we can do that in this day and age.
Did it deliver? Did you already get it?
Oh yeah, we already got it. So I ordered it
good?
on like February 11th, thinking like hopefully it gets here on time, but it got here on February 13th, and it was shipped from New York first thing in the morning, and it got here in the afternoon.
Like
And so
quality was still like
quality was incredible. So we actually just polished off
wow.
the last of the bagels and the cream cheese, because they send you 6 of them, so you can even like customize your order. So I got like 2 of the everything, 2 of the plain, like 2 of the
I've
onion
never
bagels.
had a New York bagel before, and I've always just like doubted that they're that much better.
It is
But now
very
I'm
much.
like, I got the site open, and I might be buying some bagels later, dude.
Well, it's not just the bagels, it's also like the cream cheese and the sour cream
Yes.
from New York for whatever reason. Well, I've heard it's actually the water up there, that it's really good water. And so that's the basis of why
Weird.
their pizza is so good. Why, sort of the doughy type products are good. So pizza, bagels, also like their creams and cheeses and things like that are just really, really good. And so they didn't,
Interesting.
I wish I was getting paid to sort of pump them out like that. But I
Right?
looking at this menu again, I'm like, oh God, I've got to
Not an ad.
not an ad, but
Should
I
be
am
though.
yeah, I'm definitely scrolling through. So
Well, I
you're
mean, this
looking
is
for
like
like
it is kind of cool because it's like I feel like these days just like even ordering food just is like so expensive, so I avoid it. But it's like, I mean, some of these prices are pretty decent. Where it's like, well, maybe I'll just start like ordering one of these like once a week, and now I'll
yeah.
have. I mean, like truly, honestly, I mean, some of these prices for like how much food they're sending you, like this one is like Wagyu filet mignon 2-pack. Uh, and like I'm not going to eat that whole thing, no way, in one sitting. Like $150, that's not too bad.
I mean, you
That's the
consider
single girl. Clearly, I've got no kids or anyone to worry about.
well,
I'm just gonna be like murderous
well, it's like
Wagyu.
it's like a treat yourself, or
Yeah,
it's a good
exactly.
way to, because I was gonna like send an edible arrangement or something like that, and I just didn't have quite the I was missing Valentine's Day, so I wanted to make sure that the gift
True.
I send has a little bit of an impact. And so I think that we form a lot of memories around food, and so if you have this is a great way to relive that memory, support local businesses, and
True.
be able to have another memory with that same food. So, and in the comfort of your own home too, which is you can't really knock that. So maybe some of your favorite
Love
places
that.
that you visited, like or maybe places that you've always wanted to visit, because the Philly cheesesteak that's on there too, I'm like that, I'm a little curious about that, because I've never been to Philly, I've never had one of their famous cheesesteaks. So maybe that would be an option to, in the future. But I just think from an e-commerce like logistics perspective, it's a really cool initiative. And so they've been around apparently for a handful of years, but they're always adding new restaurants to it. So I just think that was cool. So shout out to them for a little like bonus logistics of story.
Love that.
Okay.
Shout out to them. I'm gonna order food from here. That's
We've
I'll let
lost
you know how
Grace.
it goes.
She's
I know.
currently
I'm like,
perusing the
I am
menu.
just, I am cruising so hard on this right now. It's not even funny.
Well, awesome. Hopefully we will we'll send them and local businesses some more business. Okay, moving into our final topic. That's the makeup supply chain. So very similar to like source to porch, which we pick out a favorite like logistics of story, and we sort of track the entire supply chain. So moving into this is something that we talked about, I think back in December, about just having an entire show featured around just like the makeup supply chain. But we could probably knock this out in 15-20 minutes. So that's it'll be a good part of the
15
show.
would be
And
good. Yeah.
so I haven't really dived. I know you do, so I'm going to go to you in just a second to break this down for us. But my lack of knowledge around makeup, just in general, and the overall supply chain is very lacking. I have covered in the past the logistics of lipstick and sort of the lipstick index around that. And for folks who may not know,
Yeah.
lipstick is a good economic indicator of where we are at in our sort of performance wise of people how they want to spend money. We studies have shown that if we are headed towards a recession or if we are in a recession, then lipstick sales dramatically increase, and that's because people start cutting out different luxury items, but they won't cut out a luxury lipstick. It's sort of think of like a woman coming out of a bathroom and putting on lipstick. It's a sign of wealth. It's a sign of just a perception. You're communicating that wealth. And so lipstick sales tend to increase whenever there's economic downturn, because if you're going to spend money on something, especially from a female perspective, you're going to spend money on a really good lipstick. And so that's where the sort of the lipstick index comes from. And then it sort of evolves into how do we even get like red lipstick. It comes from the carmine beetle, which these beetles are, red in nature. And that's where a lot of food
Yeah.
dye, red food dye comes from too, is from the carmine beetle. Yes, an insect that they crush up and use it to make the red pigment that you have in food dyes and also red lipstick. So there's a really that's the extent of a lot of my knowledge when it comes to makeup supply chain. But since you obviously with hosting the stock out, you've been covering this for a while. There was one account that you sent over called the Lipstick Lesbians account. And do you want me to
Yes.
play the clip first, or do you want to kind of set it up for us?
Oh, well, let me set it up really quick. So, what we're kind of going to go over today is like more so like the sourcing of your makeup products. And hold on a second, I just opened up something that's playing in my ear. Sorry. And actually, I got into this like a while ago when I was in college because I have a girlfriend who is well, she's pretty big on YouTube. Her name is Faye. She's a little bit more known in Korea as well, and she has actually a makeup line that comes out of Korea. So there's a lot of really great Korean makeups and skincare that I've
Yes.
used in the past that she's put me on. And so I always found it interesting to like where all of our makeup comes from, where some of the products come from. Uh, I think in the past episode we talked about like one of Jeffree Star's lines. There was a couple of years ago he put out a really cool palette that I had pre-ordered, and it ended up changing at some point because there was a specific green color in the palette that had a specific ingredient that was like just like really hard to find at the time. So in order to like fulfill all of the palettes and everything and get it to people like in less than a year, he ended up like removing that color and it ended up coming out later and everything like that. So I always found it interesting, like, it's powders and all these like different chemicals, like how do they come up with these formulas, and how do these things actually play when it comes to pricing and quality and things of that nature? Is the US even one of the top places? And so to kind of give you, before we show the clip, to give you kind of like an outline of different countries and what they're known for, because a lot of this goes into the proprietary technology that a lot of these makeup manufacturers own, right? So some areas and some countries are better at other formulas compared to maybe a different country, just because like the patents are in one country compared to the others. So quickly here to kind of go over it for you guys. So a big one in particular is skincare. A lot of that comes out of Switzerland. That's what they're most known for. And that's for a couple of brands out there that you might know of. Beauty Pie comes out of Swiss Labs. A lot of really high-end high-end skincare comes out of there. Italy is really known for high-end premium makeups like Dior, some of the more expensive ones, and hair care too. Again, Pat McGrath actually comes from out of Italy. Charlotte Tilbury comes out of Italy as well. Beauty Pie has some of their hair stuff comes out of Italy. Divines, it's the shampoo line out of Italy too. Japan, known for skincare. Tatcha, right, is a Japanese made product. That's probably the biggest one that people really know about. And then Germany, we were talking about Germany earlier, really known for their pencils, eye pencils, especially the precision ones. They have a special patent, it sounds like a certain warehouse does in Germany.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, so like Victoria Beckham's pencils come out of there. A lot of those high-end pencils, Mac pencils, also come out of Germany too. Korea is really known for just overall innovative formulas. They have a lot of manufacturers out there that are on top of and trying different things.
Oh, the
Factory
sunscreen is the
Jart
best.
comes out. Yes, yeah. Yes, yeah, right. So a lot of that stuff, Hourglass comes out of Korea. Rare Beauty, a lot of their matte liquid liners come out of Korea too. So a lot of like kind of the new inventive formulas that people are trying will come out of there. France is known a little bit more for the fragrance side of things. So Chanel, of course, comes out of France. A few other big ones as well. And New Zealand, known a little bit actually more for the sustainable products, like the organic products that don't have a lot of man-made chemicals or anything like that. And then I think there's one more on my list. Yeah. Oh, Australia, really known for SPF and sun care products too. Clarins, I think, is a big one that you probably heard of. Kate Somerville's another one too. So it kind of showcases, last one too, body care, UK. That's what they're kind of, La Mer is another one out of there. Aromatherapy products come out of there too. And so, yeah, it kind of showcases to you like, okay, there's different places across the globe that people will to watch. But in this clip here, there's a group, and they're actually like, just came out on like a list from last year. It's one of the top like 10 for at least for ads or for like pushing products, one of the most interactive TikToks and Instagram reel accounts out there. But it's because the main girl that you're going to see talking actually spent years in makeup manufacturing. So a lot of times she'll go through and one of my favorite things she'll do a lot of times is like tell you what companies own certain things. So, you know, like those probably the same formulas. You're just buying more for like Dior when it's actually might be owned by L'Oreal at the end of the day.
Great.
Yeah, no, I
have Dior liquid foundation and concealer on as we're talking right now.
Yeah, I think it's like L'Oreal owns we all have it, the setting spray.
Oh, okay, Infallible.
No, the purple one that's like
Urban Decay all-nighter.
Yes. So it's like so you kind of think, okay, well, when you're thinking about your money, right? What am I putting it towards? And now, even though they're owned, a lot of times it's like one ingredient more that makes it better. But so they educate you on a lot of this stuff. And in this video, you'll kind of see how you can read labels and how you should interpret them in their supply chains too.
Oh, well, hold on.
In USA assembled Dominican Republic.
I love that we have our creators engaging in the mating content. She's saying two things that I was a little upset with.
Dominican Republic, never heard of shadows coming from that place.
If you are going to engage in it, definitely dig a little deeper. When you see something that says bulk, made in the USA, the batching of the powders, the raw materials, that would happen in the US. It means they mixed up all those powders and they pressed them in the case of eyeshadows in the USA, and then they ship those pans out to the Dominican Republic to glue and assemble in the Dominican Republic.
That's what she read anyway, right?
She read it, but then she said that she's never seen eyeshadows made in the Dominican Republic.
Because
the eyeshadow is not made in the Dominican Republic.
So that tells you this is not the same formula as pretty much any other shadow palette out there.
There are many, many, many other eyeshadows on the market that do the exact same thing. She also did share some commentary on how eyeshadows are typically made in China and Italy.
Oh, shadows are usually from China or Italy?
Of course, China, Italy do lots of shadows, but let's not forget Canada. They were some of the first to develop certain proprietary technologies as well. I just want to make sure we're all getting all the nuanced information. I've done the full tasting menu in the beauty industry. I've worked on the manufacturing side. I've worked on the brand side. And if we're going to be talking about where things are made and we're not sure, fam, send the videos to us. We'll make sure to do all the research needed to get all the good information to you. One last thing, Makeup by Mario's Ethereal Eyes palette that just launched Christmas, made in the USA, assembled in the Dominican Republic.
Super interesting.
Because a lot of people, so she's talking, the girl that she's talking about is reviewing Kim Kardashian's new makeup line, and a lot of people are saying it's just the Mario palette. And so that's what she's kind of pointing out at the end, is it could just be the Mario palette, because they're likely probably made at the same facilities and shipped together. And then once they get to the Dominican Republic, they just stamp them differently and put them in a different packaging and then send them back to us, right? So yeah, definitely there's another one in here where she gets into, who owns who at Sephora. That one's really cool if you want to click that one. Because it also kind of goes into what I was talking about, like who, if you go up a little bit more, that white one to the left, who owns who at Sephora.
LVMH
this one's funny for like where you want to kind of save your money as well.
All right, let's play this clip.
On Sephora. Basically, LVMH is going to own 30% probably of the store.
What does LVMH stand for?
Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Did you just have an epiphany?
Yes. All right, let's do it.
Benefit. LVMH. Makeup by Mario. This is privately held. They've actually raised capital, so that means they're backed by venture capital. NARS is still owned by Shiseido. Beauty Blender, to my knowledge, privately held company. Huda Beauty is private equity owned. I'm pretty sure Merit is owned by venture capitalists. Urban Decay, L'Oreal. Say, I want to say, is venture capital. Lancome is L'Oreal. Clinique is Estee Lauder. Too Faced, Estee Lauder. Rose Inc. is owned by, I know this, the biotech company. Amorous. Tarte is owned by Jose. Luxury Brand Partners is the incubator that does one size. Sephora Collection is, of course, LVMH. Armani is owned by L'Oreal. Hourglass is owned by Unilever. Gucci. This is going to stump me. I think Coty.
Yeah.
Yes.
Valentino shocked me. I remember researching this. It's L'Oreal.
Okay.
Dior, LVMH. They have a really big stake in ownership, 40% of the LVMH stock.
Wow.
Which is really large. Dior be doing something right. I think
Okay.
we forgot this little gondola section, which is like the LVMH island. Fenty is owned by LVMH. Well, technically, Miss Fenty is owned by Kendo.
Which is
Kendo's
owned
owned
by
by LVMH.
Wow.
So is KBD, and so is Makeup Forever. Glossier is venture capital. Rare Beauty, I want to say, is private.
I think we're good. I think we did the walk. Good job.
I think I got like maybe 80%.
That's the mirror.
No idea. Vanessa, how'd you do it? LVMH.
That is
cool.
that it's super interesting because you wouldn't think that, I guess, well, it makes a lot of sense of the manufacturing process of where it's being created and then how you can attach that to the label depending on where it's being assembled.
Yeah.
I think we need to do a deeper dive on just packaging insight and where, because I remember being in Belize, and they have one of their number one exports is citrus, and for a lot of citrus companies, so like Simply Florida or Simply orange juice or whatever, like you think that it's coming from Florida, but it's coming from Belize, and they can put on the label that it's made in Florida or that it comes from Florida because a certain amount of the manufacturing process is done here.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's crazy that it also applies to makeup as well.
Yeah. Well, that's what's kind of cool about that as well is like for those people trying, hey, Women's History Month, right? Women trying to get into the stock market more. I mean, Coty is a tradable. LVMH that she brought up is tradable too. What's the other one in there? I think L'Oreal actually is too. Elf is one of my favorite stocks of all time.
Isn't L'Oreal like the biggest makeup conglomerate? Like they own almost all makeup.
I mean, she listed Dior, Armani, like all of the high-end ones you would think are like not owned by L'Oreal, right? Are owned by L'Oreal.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah.
No, that's great insight. And I like that account. It was like an immediate follow for me. there was this other video that I found, and it kind of sucks that all right. Let me back up a minute because I got to set this up properly. So this woman, I was, just doing anytime before a show like this, I always look up on YouTube to see if anybody's done any interviews so I can sort of listen to it while I'm getting ready, while I'm doing my makeup. And one of these ones that I found is from, it's called Green Beauty Conversations. It's a YouTube channel called Formula Botanica. And the episode title, Why Beauty Logistics Are Not Boring. It feels like a weird title. Should be is. So we're moving on. So why?
They're pluralizing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's like maybe that was a Grammarly mistake there. Not
exactly what that was. Yeah.
So this YouTube channel called Green Beauty Conversations, the host is called Gemma Ortega Perez, and she's interviewing a woman by the name of Rachel Whitaker of Indie Beauty Delivers. Now, I tried to look up Rachel on LinkedIn. I found her LinkedIn, but she doesn't post ever. And then I tried to look up her company, Indie Beauty Delivers. What she is she's essentially a logistics consultant to indie beauty brands. And so she helps them think about their logistics processes before they can really start scaling. So she talks them through, like the packaging and the things to think about with your packaging, how it's going to sit on a shelf, how you're going to ship it, the ways you can design your packaging and that it's also efficient for shipping. But one thing that a couple of the moments that she brought up is she said the logistics is the only time you physically touch a customer. So if you're an indie beauty maker, or like an e-commerce, product maker, manufacturer, then thinking about it from the end consumer angle of that is the only time that your customer or you're going to touch your customer is from your product itself when it arrives on their doorstep. And so for a lot of folks or a lot of businesses, and what she was explaining is that you tend to think about the website experience, the marketing experience, all of those different things, but then they don't think about the aspect of shipping the product and then what that looks like in the box that it arrives, inside of the actual beauty packaging itself, what that looks, what that feels like, what that experience is like. And even from the lens of the tracking notifications, when people are expecting their package, like what does that process look like? Are you going to be handling those, those different queries and things like that? And how, maybe if you're selling 20 units a day, that's one thing. But when you start thinking about scaling, you really have to think about it from the lens of you have to scale everything. And so she helps these beauty, or I think she did, I don't know if she does anymore, but she was helping these companies think about the logistics process before by saying it's never too early to look at your logistics and fulfillment, and that a lot of 3PLs also will integrate. So basically off of a good relationship with your 3PL, if you were to establish that with them as you're growing and as you're scaling, she said a lot of the 3PLs will integrate their tracking tech and customer service related items to shipping right on the brand's website, which I thought was super interesting, that if you're dealing with like a Sephora or like a Ulta or, maybe some of these other, smaller, beauty companies that aren't in a big retailer like that, that if you are chatting with them about where's your product and where, because the majority of customer service inquiries are tracking related, where's my product? And so for that, you're actually communicating with the 3PL and not the company itself, which I did not know and I thought was pretty interesting as well. And I want to play a really short clip because I think it's really fascinating from like the consulting standpoint of how she's consulting these indie beauty retailers to think about your logistics partnership. And I think it's really valuable for the carriers and the brokers out there to think about this as well. So I'm going to pull up this clip.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, as a shopper, like half the fun is opening it up in the box and like how it looks and all that stuff. So that's awesome.
I mean, where do you even start to find a fulfillment partner? How do you get in contact with these people?
Yeah. And this is the biggest challenge. And actually, a number of brands put off finding a fulfillment house because it's just like, what do you do? And a number of established brands who are unhappy in the warehouses that they're in put off finding a new supplier because it's just too overwhelming to even start with. So there are a couple of things that I always recommend. So the best way of finding anybody, it doesn't matter, does it, whether you're doing fulfillment or contract manufacturer or anything, is that we are all part of the most amazing community. We're all part of these amazing Facebook groups, your mastermind group, my Facebook group. There are hundreds of entrepreneurs in there who are doing this, and a lot of them have done what you want to do. So put some feelers out, because recommendation is a great place to start. So, put some, really go to your contacts, rinse your groups that you're members of, and find out who people are using. And that's a really, really good place to start. If you're UK based, I have a free service, which is wonderful, where I will consult.
Well, a lot of that, I don't know that exists anymore, so I'll sort of stop that right
Yeah,
there.
that's true.
What I thought was interesting about that is that it's essentially word of mouth is how she's referring different beauty suppliers or beauty or indie beauty manufacturers to 3PLs in order to find out the fulfillment and their warehousing services. And so my thought process is like, wow, so you're using not only just word of mouth, but also these different Facebook groups and just different communities that are online. So if you're a freight broker out there, I would be hitting up and Googling all of these different Facebook groups for the different commodities that maybe you specialize in moving that freight, because they really talked about how in that whole show about how the relationship with your 3PL will help you get into larger retailers. And so if you're working with a 3PL, even if you are small, even if you're not in makeup, if you're in somewhere else, if you're thinking about scaling, you need to be thinking about what that end-to-end customer feels whenever they're opening up your package, whenever they're experiencing your product. And then a 3PL will then be able to help you not only get those relationships with different retailers, but be able to help you sell with that relationship to that retailer of, hey, we're using a 3PL partner that is already experienced and shipping this kind of freight. So it's going to be a seamless integration from the retailer's perspective. And so thinking about it from that lens, if I'm a freight broker, I am going to be researching all of the different Facebook groups, all of the different online communities in order to find out what these customers, these shippers are dealing with, and use it to offer insight on the logistics process. Because this woman was a consultant. And so she specializes in just beauty. And so if you think about it even a step further, if she's saying like word of mouth is king, which it always will be, like why not develop a relationship with some of these logistics consultants and they can be the relationship builder for you. So you can kind of have this multi-pronged approach. So you're not hammering out, 100 cold calls in a day or, downloading a bunch of quote unquote leads off of Zoom info and mass emailing everyone. Those things don't work. They have a very low success rate. So why not do a little bit more online research, 2 minutes of research, which another, sort of podcaster, I guess kind of still in our space, Matt Dahl, he just recently moved from the brokerage side of things to the shipper side of things. He even made a comment on this earlier today on Twitter about how he's gotten so many different cold calls and cold emails, and it's just very clearly spray and pray. So I thought that was a good insight into the logistics side of things. And if you're looking for new customers, maybe forming these relationships and building in these different communities might be a really good angle for folks out there.
Yeah, love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the referrals, right, are like the best way to sell yourself. And if you can, you brought this up, like if you can, let's say you're delivering at a retailer for one of those suppliers, makeup brands, etc., right? And they have your trucks are always on time and your packaging is always ready, good to go, easy to unload. That is going to get around. And when the time comes for someone to say, or maybe it's like that retailer's getting a new brand into them and they say, hey, who's someone we should use? Like your name's going to come up first. And I always think that's how you really grow organically your business in this industry too.
Yeah. Any other, I guess, facts about the makeup supply chain that you want to shine a light on? I think we kind of covered a lot.
Yeah, not now, but I'm gonna do some deep diving. So maybe the next one we can do a good like 30 minutes and dive even more into like some of the problems that come up because I think that'll get interesting. So research will be done, audience. Don't worry.
Yes. Well, I think it's one of those topics that the more you dive in, the more you realize that there's still much more to learn. Like I would love
Yes.
to learn more about just sort of the packaging process and how they determine where a product is actually made. If you're sourcing goods from all over the world, you know,
Mhm.
are makeup companies taking the same strides as clothing companies? You know, a lot of the pressures that are put on clothing companies of where those ingredients or those the source of the source is sourced.
Yeah.
Is that happening in makeup too? And I just
Yeah.
wonder. I don't know that it is. I think it's more of the focus on makeup has just been like, is it tested on animals? Is it tested on human? Like, you know, what
Yeah.
more of that level of visibility into the supply chain. I don't know that it exists yet for that other aspects that a lot of that pressure is put on clothing.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get into it. We'll
Yeah.
figure that out for
So this is
sure.
part 1, so maybe part
Yeah,
2, part
exactly.
3, future parts are coming soon.
Exactly.
But as we sort of round out this episode, we couldn't really let the show go off or really finish before we give kind of like a final shout out to some women that are making moves. I mean, when you're listening to this, it's obviously Women's History Month has kicked off. We are recording this on February 29th, so Leap Day. But we want to give a little bit of not a little bit, a very large shout out to Shelly Simpson, just recently named
Yay.
CEO of JB Hunt. I know you are a huge fan of Shelly. You've interviewed her before, so early thoughts and obviously kudos to her. But early thoughts on this move.
Yeah, Kaylee and I got to interview her at a Freightwaves event, and I like started crying because she was like so cool and so nice, and so no, it actually you probably can watch that video on our YouTube page if you want, but it's just an incredible person. I mean, she's even it's been times where she just like reaches out and it's just like hope everything is great. She's really, really about not only. Here's the thing I like about Shelly is if you follow her career path, she has led some really great change initiatives when it comes to JB Hunt 360 and using technology deeper to, of course, uh, make sure that they're automating a lot of their booking processes. And I've talked to nice thing about going to like Matt's and some of these like conferences where they might not know who I am. Like a lot of times I'll talk to those individuals and be like, how do you like it? You know, they like really love the way that not only was the technology introduced to them, but integrated into their work and used to like propel their own honestly financial success at companies. So she's led a number of those type of initiatives. We saw quantum just come out too. So we're going to see rail, I think, become huge in this next year, especially as companies start looking at, is there ways for me to bring my carbon footprint down, but also save money by more positive rail experience. JB Hunt as a whole, I think, just leadership wise, everyone, Fraser, everyone there just seems very, very team oriented and has everyone's back and they promote from within. I mean, the roles that she's held there and she's worked her way up over time as a female and is now with it's her and Mrs. Hunt like holding down the fort there. It's for looking for once again publicly traded as well. Got two twins, incredible twin daughters too, and just an absolute force to be reckoned with and constantly looks like that, just a smile across her face. I don't think I've ever seen Shelly frown, and maybe I don't ever want to, but I'll tell you this, just an absolute authentic. She's very authentic too, like very humble and just wants to give advice if you ask for it and not trust me, everyone in this industry is not like that, especially as they get into that CEO level. There's a lot of that kind of like arrogance a lot in this industry of you have to earn the right to meet me, and she is like not that way at all. So shout out to her, big fan, and excited to see. I mean, I've been waiting for this. So it's funny when I saw it, I'm like, there we go. Here it is. I had a lot of feelings that this was going to happen soon and happy that it finally has. So we talk about what a way to jump into Women's History Month, right? It's the day before we get into it. We announce this. JB Smart, as always.
Heck yeah. No, I think it's great that especially your point about promoting from within, because she opens up this LinkedIn post, and we'll have it linked in the comments in case you want to check it out. But she says, in 1994, I started my career as an hourly customer service representative. I knew quickly I had joined an innovative company, a leader in the transportation and logistics industry. And she goes on and on about, sort of her career. But she is being the fifth individual in our organization's 62-year history to assume the CEO role, which I think is just incredible. And she looks, in this picture, she looks very presidential. Like, this is like an Oval Office type photo. So we'll definitely put that in the show notes so you can check it out. But it's a heck of a way to kick off Women's History Month. And I think for a lot of folks, if you followed her on LinkedIn or seen her speak and at any of the conferences, it was just a matter of time. It felt like until she was given this role, because it feels like this has been something she's been, sort of working towards and training for her whole life. And I don't even know her on the level, obviously, that you do. I just know her through, some of her speeches and social media posts. But it feels like a role that she was born to have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny. It might be right here. I've got just the nicest card from her that I don't think it's right here, but
the fact that she reaches out, her busy schedule, that she reaches out to you regularly and says hey, how you doing, is awesome.
Well, I have a handwritten card from her somewhere in here that's just so happy and motivating and awesome. So who even writes with their hands anymore these days, right? So
not me.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to read it even if I tried.
I know, right?
It's very terrible. That's why I learned typing in ninth grade, so people would be able to read what I write. But I think that's a really good place to sort of end in this show. I heard a calendar notification at 3:30, so I'm assuming that you have something going on here in a couple minutes that you got to run to. We've obviously been recording for close to 2 hours now, and we talked for about an hour before we hit record. So that's usually how these Thursday shows roll. So Grace, anything you want to leave the audience with, any last remarks, or where to find more of your work stories you're working on, all that good stuff, which real quick, we will have a link to your interview with Shelley Simpson in the show notes in case folks want to check that out.
Love that. And no, like I said earlier, I'm happy I'm going to have some more writing time in front of me now moving forward. So there's a couple of things. I'm going to start doing a Friday Freight Tech Roundup. So we'll get a little bit more info out there on some of the really cool investments and raises in the space. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things I'm working on with our editorial team I'm excited to bring to the table. So you guys will see all that soon.
Awesome. Hell yeah. No, that great stuff. And congratulations on the role. I think that's going to be something that you're going to be able to have a little bit more free time to invest in longer form stories and really go in depth. And I think that is something that we really need, because it feels like there's a lot of industry podcasts out there. But as both of us can attest to, with going to Manifest recently, there was about 60 of us on that media PR list, and we were swamped. Every single one of us were swamped, inundated with PR requests of companies wanting to meet, have stories written about them, recorded with them, all that good stuff. And we can't cover it all. So if you're on the fence about, sharing your perspective, please don't remain on the fence. Obviously go for it. And your career could evolve just like Grace's has. So all good things. Thank you guys also for tuning in. We will be back next month with another episode of Freight Friends. But until then, we'll see you real soon.